From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. We are a little more than a week away from the general election on November 5th. And while a handful of states may determine the presidency, there are critical races happening right here in our region that could determine the balance of power in the U.S. House, where Republicans currently hold a narrow majority. Last week, we talked with the candidates in Southwest Washington's 3rd Congressional District. This week, we focus on Oregon's 5th District and the race between Republican freshman Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer and her Democratic challenger, Janelle Bynum. The district covers Lynn County, most of Clackamas County, Deschutes County, and parts of Multnomah and Marion counties. The candidates have asked to appear separately, so we'll start with Representative Chavez-DeRemer, and we'll hear from Janelle Bynum in our next segment. Here's a little bit about Chavez-DeRemer. She started her public service career in 2002 on the Happy Valley Parks Committee. She later won a seat on the Happy Valley City Council, then was elected mayor in 2010, becoming the city's first female and Latina mayor. She was re-elected in 2014. In 2022, she was elected to Congress, becoming one of the first Latinas and first Republican woman elected to Congress in the state of Oregon. She is a small business owner. She and her husband, Dr. Sean DeRemer, founded an anesthesia management company and opened several medical clinics throughout the Pacific Northwest. They are proud parents of adult twin daughters. Welcome to my guest, Republican Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer. Welcome back to Straight Talk. So nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Well, Congresswoman, why do you think that you are the best candidate to represent your politically diverse district, and what have you been able to deliver to them during the 2 years in Congress?
Well, I think what people are going to be looking at in this district is somebody who can, work with everybody. This district is a split district, and people wanted to know, will you go back to Washington and tell Oregon's story? And I promised that when I went back to Washington, and I've been one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. I talk about it all the time because I think it's important to reflect on the 20 years before that of being a mayor and a city councilor. But again, over the 300 bills that I am on, over 84% of those are bipartisan, and I think that's a testament to my record. Also, talking about the issues that matter most to Oregonians, and that's the fentanyl crisis that we're seeing, affordability, making sure that we're bringing those taxpayer dollars back to our districts. I've brought over $27 million back to the district for people to see that investment go back to Oregonians that they've paid. Certainly we've closed 800 cases. When we're talking about what Congress people do, it's how can we help at any federal agency, and we've done that. So I think people are looking for trust, integrity, that we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll do the hard work. And that's what I've promised to do, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Your opponent wants to tie you to Donald Trump, and you've endorsed him. And he's talked about doing some things that some voters might find extreme, like dismantling the Department of Education, gutting the Federal Emergency Management Agency, repealing parts of the Affordable Care Act, firing tens of thousands of federal employees. If President Trump is elected president again, will you align yourself with him and MAGA's far-right policies?
Well, again, representing Oregon, keeping the promise of being bipartisan, that's what matters, I think, to a lot of people, and addressing the issues that affect Oregonians most. I think the former president will definitely address the issue at the southern border. People are concerned about the fentanyl crisis that we're seeing. It's what I hear about all the time. People are concerned about their children. People are concerned about dying on the streets. We see the homeless and mental health crisis that we're seeing. I want to make sure that we're addressing those issues and bring back the policies that can keep Oregonians safe. But despite who's in the White House, I've worked with the current administration on issues, and I'll continue to, despite who's in the White House, to focus on what matters to Oregonians.
What about some of the things I mentioned, like dismantling the Department of Education? Would you support that?
Well, why would we support something that is an investment to our kids here? We want to focus on what's happening at the state level. Most of the education decisions are at the state level. We want to make sure that there's oversight, that we're protecting our children. So I don't see that we would head in that direction when we have oversight over about 8% of the public funding that goes to education. But I want to work with the state partners to make sure that we're having our kids focus on reading and writing. And right now, Oregonians are suffering with what's happening at the State House. We have to make sure that we're paying attention, being partners with our states, not really being segregated on that issue. I just think it's important to Oregonians that we protect our kids.
This week, Kamala Harris and also President Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, who is his longest serving chief of staff, called President Trump, the former president, a fascist. What do you think?
Oh, well, listen, I think right now we're in that political world where people are going to throw things at each other. Again, Laurel, I've been here many times. My record supports Oregonians, my bipartisan record. I'm proud to do that kind of work. I want people to know that they can rise above the political infighting. That's what people are tired of. That's what I'm certainly tired of. And that's why I work with the other congressmen from Oregon and across the nation to make sure that we're focused on what matters most. And that's, that's affordability. It is the cost of living. It's can they afford their houses, their gas prices, their food prices, and can we make sure that our public is safe? That's what I spend my time on, and that's what I'll continue to spend my time on.
As you well know, abortion is a divisive issue in this election, and reproductive rights are important to a lot of Oregonians. During your 2022 campaign, you tweeted and said on Facebook that it's time to listen to 80% of Americans who want some level of restriction on abortion and pass legislation like the heartbeat bill, which would ban abortion at about 6 weeks. Now, you and I talked about this a couple of years ago right here, and you seemed somewhat conflicted. You said you don't support a national abortion ban. You respect the rights of Oregonians as protected by Oregon law, their reproductive rights. But at the same time, you told me that you thought that abortion should be restricted at about 12 weeks or the first trimester. So help us understand what you believe in when it comes to abortion.
Well, it's nuanced for sure, and it is a serious issue that people want to talk about, and I think we should talk about it. But what's happening now is the reality of where we are. Oregonians have spoken up, and I stand by that. Oregonians have spoken up and said they want access to abortion. And now it's out of the federal hands. It is in the state legislature, and I think people feel that they know that their protections are protected here in Oregon since 2017. And I have promised Oregonians that there's nothing I can do. I have not taken one vote that is fundamentally going to change what Oregonians have access to, and I will continue down that road, and I don't support a national ban. And so it's out of the federal hands, it's in the state hands, and the only people who can make that change is the state legislature and Oregonians, and they're not going to do that because they've said over and over again, I will stand by that, and I will protect Oregonians if that's where they want to go.
At the federal level, though, you did side with Republicans on banning federal funds from covering service for a women's abortion if she crosses state lines, right?
Well, you're talking about the Hyde Act. The Hyde Amendment, federal funds, that has been that way for over 70 years, where no federal dollars would go toward abortion. And then that's where we are with that. But I want to make sure that Oregonians, when we're talking about Oregon, fundamentally, women will have access to abortion because that's what Oregonians want, and that's what I will continue to stand by, Laurel, because I think that that's important to address.
What about mifepristone? Because some conservative Republicans want to reverse the FDA approval of the abortion pill and also ban providers from mailing mifepristone. Would you support a move like that?
To ban that? No. And I've been public about that. I would not support that. That's, again, access. And same with over-the-counter contraception. I support women who have over-the-counter contraception, and I've been very outspoken about that and protecting that.
A Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee ad accused you of voting against Social Security 26 times. And as we reported in a KGW fact check story, it really is more complicated than that. You voted to move forward with bills you supported rather than take up unrelated resolutions that protected Social Security and Medicare. But Social Security's trust fund is supposed to run out of money. It's projected between 2033 and 2035, so retirees wouldn't get their full benefits. And a group of Republicans has a budget plan to raise the retirement age. Would you support raising the retirement age for future retirees?
Well, I'm so glad that this channel did do that fact check, because that was just an outright lie by my opponent. I have never taken a vote to dismantle Social Security or Medicare. Actually, I have made sure I signed on to the Social Security Fairness Act to protect what Americans and Oregonians have paid into that. And again, that was an attack ad by my opponent that's gone across the nation to take away from her record, where she has stepped in at the federal level, at the state level, and supported a Senate bill 1049 to make sure to dismantle for teachers, for police, and for firefighters to take away their PERS. So again, it's a distraction, and it's an outright lie, and I've never voted for that. When we're talking about Social Security as a whole, we're talking about discretionary and mandatory funding. Mandatory funding comes for Social Security, and that's going to be protected. And people have a right, hardworking Oregonians have a right for that money.
Would you vote to raise the retirement age?
Well, that's not a conversation that's on the table that I've had.
But something has to be done, or the Social Security funds are going to run out of money. So what would you do?
What we do want to do is make sure that we're protecting the people who've paid into Social Security. That is not right for any government at the federal level or the state level.
But how do you protect them?
Well, we have to have the conversation about how do we have more build into the coffers? How do we have a greater economy to put more money in those coffers to protect the dollars that people have already put in? We don't want that money to run out. We want to build those coffers. I am committed to making sure that we have enough money for the people who put that money in that they get that money back. That's what they deserved, and that's what they worked hard for.
You mentioned immigration. The Senate wasn't able to pass the most aggressive border bill in decades, one that conservative Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford helped craft in a bipartisan deal because Donald Trump told Republicans not to vote for it. Now, it didn't come up in the House, but if it had come up in the House, it would have added funding for 1,500 more border agents and 1,600 asylum officers. Would you have voted for that bill, the Senate bill, if it had come up in the House, even if Donald Trump had told you not to vote for it?
Well, we didn't have an opportunity to vote on that, but I do want to highlight, we did pass the most security border package on the House floor early last year, and it's still sitting on the Senate, Chuck Schumer's desk. And that's unfortunate that he didn't take a look at that, because that would have given the tools for our law enforcement and our border security. So I didn't have an opportunity to vote on that bipartisan bill you're talking about, but we would have taken definitely a hard look at it. But what I did do after the fact was work with my colleagues across the aisle, a bipartisan bill to make sure that we could support our border and support all borders. And we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Israel.
I know you were on the show with Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez.
It was the
Washington.
Bipartisan Dignity Act. And I think that that matters for all of these issues, to make sure that we're not only addressing border security, but we're also going to address immigration, because I think this is an important issue. But we do have to secure that border. And if a bill comes forward from the Senate side that I have an opportunity to look at, I will always take a look at that, because people are crying out loudly that we need to secure that border, because we see what's happening on the streets. We can't measure 110. My opponent, I know, we go back to the local issues because this is important. I will continue to fight to secure the border at the same time that my opponent will vote on and support decriminalizing hard drugs and not support law enforcement officers here to do the job they need to do to protect our young children. And I think that's what people are going to ask themselves when they go to vote.
We have about 45 seconds to a minute left, and I want to ask you what you think, in closing, your closing comments for voters, what you think the most important difference is between you and your opponent that voters should consider as they get ready to vote.
Well, as you know, people who have supported me, I'm supported by Republicans, Democrats, and independents. I'm supported by over 20 labor unions who chose not to support my opponent because they don't trust her and they don't believe her. Law enforcement, all the ORCOPs, farmers, ranchers, everybody has supported me. They have left her behind because they do not believe her. She has chosen to support, and I will talk about this all the time, the rioters, the rapists, businesses who are going out. She has decided to not protect a young woman who had a sexual harassment complaint, and she was a mandatory reporter. I think that's important for voters to understand and the constituents to understand, is that somebody's going to work with them across the aisle to get the work done. That's going to be me. I will continue down that road every single time to protect Oregonians first. And my opponent, Janelle Bynum, should not be given a promotion when she couldn't do the job that she has failed to do over the almost 10 years that she's been in the state legislature.
Well, Lori Chavez-DeRemer, thanks for joining us. We'll give Janelle Bynum a chance to react to some of those claims that you made. And if you'd like to find out more about Lori Chavez-DeRemer, you can check out her website, lorichavezdreamer.com. And next up, Democratic candidate Representative Janelle Bynum. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. We're talking with the candidates in a key congressional race, one that's in the national spotlight because it could determine which party holds majority control in the U.S. House. It's Oregon's 5th district, a race between freshman Republican Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer and Democrat Oregon State Representative Janelle Bynum. We heard from Representative Chavez-DeRemer in our first segment. Now it's Janelle Bynum's turn. Here's a little bit of background. Janelle Bynum has served 4 terms as an Oregon State Representative for House District 39, including Happy Valley and North Clackamas. She earned scholarships and put herself through college and got her undergrad in electrical engineering from Florida A&M University, and she got her MBA from the University of Michigan. She and her husband Mark own 4 McDonald's restaurants, and they live in Happy Valley with their 4 children. If elected, she would be Oregon's first Black member of Congress. Welcome to my guest, Democratic candidate for Congress, Oregon State Representative Janelle Bynum. Welcome back to Straight Talk. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Representative, tell me a little bit about your story. What is it about your story that you think makes you the best candidate to represent your politically diverse district?
Well, I'm a mother of four, a small business owner, an electrical engineer, and a 4-term state legislator. And I have served over the last 8 years bringing the stories of working families, the hopes and dreams of working families to the state legislature. I'm one that has passed large pieces of legislation, whether it's on the CHIPS Act, bringing more than $43 billion worth of economic activity to Oregon, also codifying protections for reproductive health care in our state, as well as making sure that our girls are paid just as much as our boys. You know, as a parent, we all have those dreams that our kids can live in a world of equality. And so I think for me, it is really about making sure that the hopes, the dreams of working families are represented in our government. Most importantly, I think it's having a champion and a fighter for families of Oregon 5, and that means no matter what their political affiliation, they know they have someone that they can count on to bring their stories to Washington. Your opponent tries to paint you as an extreme liberal who is soft on crime. Her campaign points to your support of a citizen-initiated Measure 110 that decriminalized possession of small amounts of drugs. The legislature has since overturned that and recriminalized drug possession. But do you regret your original support of Measure 110? I think the people wanted a compassionate response to a very serious problem that we have here in Oregon, which is substance abuse, addiction, lack of mental health services. What I did was step up and made sure that, number one, we had $80 million in investments for mental health supports, that we also looked at how we were delivering these services. And then when things weren't working right, I led the charge to make sure that we recriminalized with expediency fentanyl, and we overturned Measure 110. So it's not just about what the citizens wanted and how we implemented it. It's like, if it's not working, do we do something about it? And I think that is what makes me different from my opponent. I held town halls. She's never had one on fentanyl. I made sure that our residents knew what was happening. People were losing their children. I took the extra steps. I worked with law enforcement to host that town hall. She didn't do anything. If you weren't on the actual committee that crafted that legislation, House Bill 4002, right? It started in the Senate. Okay. The attack ads go on to link you with defund the police groups, and the Oregon Coalition of Police and Sheriffs has criticized police reform legislation that you led, including restricting police officers from stopping vehicles with equipment violations. And they say that unlicensed or unsafe vehicles are getting a free pass, and it hampers their ability to search suspects for weapons that could lead to violent crime. They said in a press release there's no greater champion for defund the police than you. Your campaign has said you're proud of your record to keep Oregonians safe. So give us some examples of where you support the police and keeping Oregonians safe. Well, I think as a mom and a wife, we experience, and an African American, we experience law enforcement a little bit differently. And my goal is to make sure that every Oregonian, every citizen in this state, every person that crosses our boundaries has a fair and legitimate experience with the best and the brightest people who wear our badge. And I believe that what's important is that when you call the police, as a business owner, when I call the police, I need them to show up. So this idea of defund the police was something I never supported. And I think it's just a political ploy to take people's eyes off of the fact that Lori Chavez-DeRemer supports someone who has credibly been accused of sexual assault and flouts the law regularly, Donald Trump. So that's what I think that is about politically. When it comes to what police need, we work together with the police and sheriff's associations to make sure that when we were doing 23 police accountability bills, that the best and the brightest were wearing the badge. And there were some organizations that didn't show up to that table. They had every opportunity to, but they chose not to. And I was celebrated for my bipartisan work in that effort. I want to talk about abortion because you brought this up, but polls show most Americans support at least some restrictions on abortion and say that stage of pregnancy should be a factor in determining legality. Would you support legislation that places any restrictions on abortion? The question here is, should the government be in the room with a woman and her doctor? That is the question. I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she and her friend were discussing what they were going to do for graduate school, where they wanted to go, their hopes and dreams. And they became very, very clear as they were narrowing down places that they didn't want to go anywhere where their reproductive rights were not fully protected. That was not a conversation that I'd had with her. This is a conversation young women across the country are having. This is a conversation that, as I was canvassing just a few weeks ago, a woman told me she had the same conversation with herself not long ago. So it's something that I think Americans are thinking about, and Lori Chavez-DeRemer, Mike Johnson, Trump, they're all trying to play this game. And they know that what their ultimate goal is to have a full set of reproductive options that don't include birth control, that don't include IVF, that just include them being in the doctor's office with a woman and her doctor.
And you want Congress to pass federal legislation that codifies abortion rights
Absolutely.
offered by Roe v. Wade.
Unapologetically.
Let me ask you about something, a controversy that's come up in the last few weeks. It's come up at least one of your debates, that Fox News has reported on a complaint and some text messages that allege you brushed off a sexual harassment complaint and assault of a minor volunteer by a field organizer who was working on your 2022 campaign. The alleged perpetrator was employed by Future PAC, which is the Oregon House Democratic Caucus's campaign arm. As a mandatory reporter of sexual abuse, did you report the complaint to the proper authorities?
Yes, and we should always take reports very seriously. I'm a mom, I'm a mom of 2 girls, so I especially take that very seriously. And we should also never politicize these issues. We know that came up from a political angle. We know that it was investigated, and we know that Lori Chavez-DeRemer is really trying to distract from the fact that she supports a 34-time convicted felon, and she supports someone who has credibly been accused of sexual assault.
Now, Future PAC says it doesn't have any report or any actionable complaint from 2022. So what do you think happened? Are you satisfied with what happened with that complaint that you made to Future PAC?
I don't have any evidence of anything other than what I reported. That was their obligation, and I don't have any feedback that there was anyone harmed or that there's any legitimacy to the claim.
Do you think you should have reported it to the police or DHS?
That was not the information that I had. I did not have information that should have been reported to the police.
Let me ask you, if you are elected, what's the number one thing you want to bring to your district?
Oh, I really want to make sure that we have funding for housing. So that means infrastructure. When we don't have roads and we don't have water infrastructure, we can't build all of the housing that we actually need. What I want to bring to the country is a codification of Roe. That is very important to make sure that we have access to health care wherever you are in the country. So those 2 things I would say are at the top of the list. One other piece of, I guess, information that voters have told me that they care about is protecting our environment. So we know that as we need to build houses, as we look to the future, we want to make sure that we do that with an eye to protecting our beautiful state. But we also want to make sure that we're investing in wildfire management and wildfire prevention, clean air and clean water. Those are the 3 things that Oregonians have told me that they really want for CD5.
As we get ready to wrap up this show, what do you think is the biggest difference between you and your opponent that you want voters to consider as they get ready to vote?
A level of authenticity. I'm a mom of 4. I'm a business owner. I'm an engineer. I'm a legislator. I have the experience that it takes to bring authenticity to our lawmaking. I used to think that my children were heavy. I kind of was the working mom and I wanted to be at everything. But once I realized that in lawmaking, when you bring your experience and you bring it with a level of authenticity that is undoubtable, that is unquestionable, it means that I can talk about things like what our kids in special education need. I can talk about what it means to have to flee a wildfire, because that's what we had to do. I can talk about what it means to be a small business owner and not always have the money in the bank that you need to do every investment or to take care of everything that you want to take care of. It means that, as an African American woman, that I can talk about experiences of people in our state those types of conversations we need to have, and we need to have them honestly. I'm not someone that's going to rubber stamp anyone's agenda. I'm going to make sure that through listening and learning, town halls, showing up when people call me, doing everything that I can to represent them, that they will have the absolute best representative they could possibly have for Congressional District 5.
Representative Janelle Bynum, thank you for joining us. You can find more by checking out her website, janellebynum.com. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk.